She started out in a band with her sisters at age 14 and ended up leaving the United States at age 21 and becoming what many over in England consider the queen of rock and roll. So why couldn't Suzi Quatro make it here in the United States? Being a rock and roller from Detroit should have helped some. She had talent, she had the look, she had the energy. Even today at 73, she can still bring it. I don't know, maybe it was a little too late in her career before she found her way back over here. Or maybe the United States just wasn't ready for someone like her. So let's take a look back and see if we can piece some of her career together and see why she had great success in England, Australia, and parts of Europe, but not so much here in her home country. Born Susan K. Quatro, June 3, 1950, in Detroit, Michigan. She was the fourth of 5 children of Arthur Quatro and Helen Sanisley. She was raised in a musical family which included 3 sisters and 1 brother. All of them played various instruments. Suzi herself made her musical debut on stage playing bongos in her father's jazz band at age 8. When Suzi was 14, her older sister Patty started an all-girls band with a couple of her neighborhood friends called the Pleasure Seekers in May of 1964. A month later, in June, Suzi joined up, along with one of the other members' sisters, to make the group 5-piece. Suzi would end up being the bass player and doing some of the lead vocals. The band would be playing local gigs around the Detroit area and then start recording and touring. The band would last around 7 years, with members changing in and out around Suzi and her sister Patty. In the spring of 1966, Suzi and Patty's older sister Arlene would join the group to play keyboards, and her husband, Leo Finn, would be managing the group. The band would finally end up with all 4 Quatro sisters in the group at the same time, with little sister Nancy finally joining in 1969. Here's a picture of Suzi, Nancy, and Patty. Patty resembles Cher an awful lot in this photo. Suzi was improving and starting to come into her own. Her, Patty, and one of the other band members had done some go-go dancing on a teen dance television show. The Pleasure Seekers had started out as a garage band and worked their way up to a polished show, a Las Vegas-type act, and when the psychedelic music came along in the late 60s, they trended right along with it. They signed a recording deal with Mercury Records in March 1968 and were recording and touring frequently, and even doing some USO tours overseas. But at the end of 1969, it had pretty much run its course. Sister Arlene decided to leave the band to be home with her kids. About a year before this, she had split up with her husband, Leo Finn, who had also been the band's manager, and he had ended up leaving also. The Pleasure Seekers had a good run and kept it up right on until 1970. The 3 remaining sisters decided to change the band name to Cradle. They did get some good gigs opening for some bigger name acts, and Sister Arlene came back to try and help manage them. But it didn't really help for long. The end was coming soon for the sisters band, but not for Suzi. In 1971, she was to have 2 solo deals offered to her. She ended up going with Mickey Most and Rack Records, fronting her own rock group over in the UK. So at the end of October 1971, Suzi Quatro left Cradle and the United States and headed for the UK to start her new career. She was 21 years old and never looked back. Her first professional appearance in the UK came in 1972 when she formed a band using guitarist Lynn Tuckey, whom she would end up marrying in 1976, Alistair McKenzie on keyboards, and Keith Hodge on drums, and set off on a UK tour supporting the rock group Slade. Her first song, Rolling Stone, pretty much flopped, except in Portugal, where it did reach number 1. So Mickey Most decided to get Suzi in the hands of songwriters Mike Chapman and Nicky Chinn. They provided her with her first hit, Can the Can, in 1973, and it made people sit up and take notice by reaching #1 on the British charts within 4 weeks and remaining in the top 30 for more than 3 months. By now, Suzi was dressing all in leather, and with the 3 guys backing her, she came out with a string of 9 more hit songs, all charting higher than #20, and another one again reaching #1, titled Devilgate Drive. All of this in the UK, Australia, and parts of Europe. Yes, her success spread to Europe, especially Germany, where she scored a huge hit single, duetting with Chris Norman on Stumblin' In. The Stumblin' In duet reached the top 10 across the Atlantic back in the United States, but ironically for her, she just couldn't seem to get anyone over here to notice, with Can the Can only peaking at number 56 on the Billboard charts. And she had some success with the old Elvis number, All Shook Up. She says Elvis even called her up and told her that her version of that song was the best he'd ever heard. The King even offered for her to come up to Graceland, but she turned it down, saying she just didn't have the time in her schedule. If that's true, I'll bet that didn't sit well with Elvis. Maybe here in the States they noticed Suzi a little, but the critics didn't like what they saw or heard. Many of them found Suzi's marketing angle irritating and kind of offensive. Here's what the New Music Express critic Nick Kent had to say about Suzi. An image superficially bloated with potential, but really just punk penthouse fodder, all lip-smacking hard-on leather, freewheeling Hellcat raunch projected via a bunch of chinny-chap ready-mades. Now by chinny-chap ready-mades, he's speaking of the songwriters, Mike Chapman and Nicky Chinn, who was considered kind of bubblegum at writing. Maybe if she wouldn't have dressed in leather, or maybe her guys in the band wasn't glam enough, maybe the critics would have had better to say, or the labels could have found a marketing angle for her. I don't know. Over in England, they all loved her, and she would always work. Can't blame her for never moving back to the United States. Her career thrived over in England. She did gain some notoriety back home when Rolling Stone magazine put her on the cover for the January 2nd issue in 1975. Suzi says it was quite a thrill to be on the cover. She still has a framed copy of it hanging on her wall at home. In 1977, Suzi was cast to play reoccurring character Leather Tuscadero, the younger sister of Fonzie's girlfriend Pinky Tuscadero, for 7 episodes on the sitcom Happy Days. The 7 episodes were to run into the 1979 season. I think she had a good time and got along great with the cast from what she says, especially Ronnie Howard and Henry Winkler. I love them both dearly, Suzi said. They're good people. I asked Ronnie Howard about my Happy Days role, and I asked him if it ever felt like I was a new actress or that I was new to the show, and he said, no, it felt like he had always been there. He actually said to me one time, Suzi, don't ever take acting classes. And I asked him why not, and he said, because what you do is organic and natural, and acting classes would ruin you. So that's actually a big compliment. And Henry's? He's just a sweetheart. The bit he says at the end of the Suzi Q documentary, it's one of the best bits in the whole thing. So I made good friends on Happy Days. It was a good thing to do, a good decision, and I valued my time with them there. Speaking of her documentary Suzi Q, it's a must-watch. It came out in 2019, and I really enjoyed it. You can find it here on YouTube or Amazon and a few other streaming channels. Hearing what other musicians like Alice Cooper and Joan Jett have to say about Suzi really lets you know the impact she and her music had. Later on, Suzi would star in the West End revival of the musical Annie Get Your Gun.
I got what I had when it started.
She did a fantastic job. When I saw the video footage, I could hardly believe it was her. Take some time to watch it. You'll see another side of the talent of Suzi Quatro. She is a whole lot more than just a rock and roller in leather. She also wrote and produced her own show, Tallulah Who? About the life of American silent movie star Tallulah Bankhead. Suzi's also an author and has written 6 books. Her autobiography, Unzipped, is a great read. You really get to know her in that book. Suzi hosted the Midnight Special in 1979. She performed 5 songs. A couple of guests on that show were Queen and David Bowie. But still, for some strange reason, she just didn't seem to catch on here in America. As the 70s turned into the 80s, Suzi's record sales declined in the UK, but she always seemed to be in demand for live shows back then, and still is today, really. She has shows booked up into 2024. She once said while celebrating 50 years as a professional, "I'll retire when I go on stage, shake my ass, and there's silence." She said she doesn't tour for the money anymore. It's just part of who she is, and she'll keep on doing it as long as she can, and the fans still come out to see her. Her first marriage was to her longtime guitarist, Lynn Tuckey, in 1976, and they divorced in 1992. And in 1993, she married German concert promoter Rainier Haas, and they're still married, although last I saw he was living in Germany and Suzi in England. I don't know why she didn't really catch on here in the United States, although she gave it a good try. I heard her say once that although she lives in England, she will always be a Detroit rocker at heart. I'll leave a link to her website in the description below the video. If you have any more to add to this, feel free to do so in the comments sections. If you haven't subscribed to the channel, do that too, and check out more of the videos I have on it. I also turned on the memberships for those of you who might want to join and help support the channel even more. Just look for the join button under the video. I'll catch you later, and thanks for watching.